about Iran either. Sorry. Throw them out if you don't like them. It has nothing to do with me. And the fact that the idea that I have to give a flying you should be standing with Iran. Shut the up. Will you shut the up? If they want to throw the bums who run Iran out, throw them the out.
Well, it looks like comedian Tim Dillon has had it with Iranian-American monarchists demanding that Americans essentially drop everything to support a regime change war in a foreign country that we really should have nothing to do with, and that, of course, is Iran. Now, in a little bit, you'll hear why Tim Dillon is so fed up with these foreign entanglements. But before we do, it is worth getting a clearer picture on what was really happening on the ground in Iran and how the protests devolved into bloody chaos. Now, American press, I think, has done a pretty poor job in reporting that story because they just take what pro-regime change ghouls have to say at face value, and they just regurgitate it. But luckily, the Financial Times decided to do some journalism, to do some reporting and try to get a better sense of the nuances on the ground in Iran. And so it turns out that the initial government response or regime response to the demonstrations was pretty restrained. And government officials were actually looking for ways to appease the demonstrators' economic concerns. Because if you remember, when the story first broke, when we first learned of demonstrations taking place in Iran, it was widely reported that it was due to economic frustrations, okay? Now, let's get to the Financial Times reporting. As they note, testimonies from the scenes of the unrest, some spoken directly to the FT, in addition to those smuggled out through intermediaries, reveal a muddied account of the turmoil itself in which agitators mingled with genuine protesters. Let me repeat that last part again. In which agitators mingled with genuine protesters. Now, I want to be clear. I believe that there were organic demonstrations taking place in Iran. I'm not denying that at all. But what I want to be abundantly clear about is that those organic protests immediately got co-opted by the provocateurs, by the agitators for their own purposes. Quote, in a few days, the numbers were growing, but there wasn't an atmosphere of fear. I did not see any violence, not from our side, not from the government. That's from a history professor in Iran who joined the demonstrations. The organic demonstrators, of course. So he notes, no, we're not. I mean, there wasn't a violent reaction from the regime initially. But then things took a sudden turn immediately. That changed at 8 p.m. on Thursday, January 8th, when mass crowds appeared to flood the streets in response to a call by Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Shah deposed in the 1979 revolution that brought the Islamic Republic to power. So here you have a man who hasn't lived in Iran for 47 years, provoking people in Iran, giving them orders on what to do and how to do it. And well, there's more. He and his US-based Persian monarchists certainly muddied the waters. And I think that they did more damage to the protesters than anything else. And in fact, a lot of those protesters agree with me on that. So luckily I had the opportunity to, by the way, meet one of those pro-regime change, Iranians on Piers Morgan's show. And I want to go to the first video on this so you can get a sense of, well, their mindset.
There is a huge hypocrisy in the way that most people in the West have even paid attention to what's going on in Iran over the last 2 weeks. In just 3 days, we don't have an exact death toll, but it could be more people than have been killed in Gaza in over the 3 years that we had that war, 2.5 years that we had that war.
That's
but
preposterous.
why are you saying, oh my God? I mean, can I speak? Can we talk about the fact that in 1979, this government came in and launched an ideological war sure that all of you are victims too, that are spewing these talking points. Why? Because they wanted to. Remember ISIS that we were all afraid
Why?
of?
Because we're not foot soldiers for the Zionists? Is that why? Because we're not foot soldiers for Zionists? The same Zionists that are trying to co-opt an organic uprising in Iran and essentially ruin it? Is that why? That is why. That is why. Now we're gonna hear more from our exchange in just a minute. But before we do, she brings up the issue of hypocrisy. And in fact, a lot of Persian Americans keep making this point over and over again. Oh, you're a hypocrite because you spoke out against the mass slaughter of Palestinians, and you have nothing to say about the Iranian protesters who have been met with violence from the Iranian regime. Okay, so let me speak slowly so these people can understand the very obvious difference, okay? So in the case of Israel and their mass slaughter campaigns in the Middle East, we the American people, for the most part, if you look at polling, do not support it, are against it. But we are forced through our federal government, because the Israel lobby has basically bought both sides of the political aisle, we are forced to send our resources to a genocidal regime known as Israel so they can carry out the mass slaughter of innocents in the Middle East, particularly in Palestine, particularly in the West Bank and Gaza. They don't stop there, of course. They also carry out their terroristic acts in places like Lebanon, Syria. I mean, you get the point. They drag us into wars on their behalf, including attempting to drag us into a disastrous regime change war with Iran. Now, in the case of what the Iranian regime does against its own people, which of course I'm against, we're not forced to support it. We're not forced to fund it. In fact, the US government has implemented crushing sanctions against Iran. So yeah, there's a big difference. Because I'm sure if you poll the American people, the majority of us are against the Iranian regime raining terror on their own people.
Don't forget, Noble Mobile saving you a ton of money. So a lot of people are signing up now and beginning to realize, what the hell, why am I paying so much to Verizon and AT&T? So your bill's only $50 a month, but it can actually be less because they give you money back if you don't use your data. So if you're paying more than $50, there's no reason to not switch. It's crazy not to switch because same phone, same number, same contacts, literally nothing changes. TYT.com/switch, TYT.com/switch. All right, we'll be right back.
The only difference is in the case of Gaza, we have a federal government that supports the slaughter, that forces us to use our resources and forces our government and economic system to go into massive amounts of debt to funnel resources to Israel so they carry out mass slaughter. And by the way, the woman that you just heard make that disgusting argument that Iran in just a few short days slaughtered more people in Iran than Israel has killed in Gaza. We don't know what the official numbers are in Gaza, by the way. I don't think that 70,000 or over 70,000 is the accurate number. I think the number is actually much, much higher, okay? But let's say we all accept that the number is 70,000 people killed in Gaza. This weirdo thinks that 70,000 people were killed in Iran in like a week. By the way, she denies that Israel has engaged in a mass slaughter campaign in Gaza. It's important to know that. Anyway, I don't care what she thinks, and I want to be very clear. I don't care what any Zionist thinks about my views on Iran, because their views on Iran are the most irrelevant thing on the planet to me. They have an agenda, and that agenda is to get our soldiers to fight a regime change war in the Middle East, in Iran, on Israel's behalf. And if they think that, they can suck it. If they think that they're gonna shame me for not crying about what the Iranian regime allegedly did against its own people, it's not gonna work. Because here's the thing, you have to have a moral high ground in order for me to even consider feeling guilty, even consider feeling shame. But I'm not gonna feel shame when you're sitting there denying the atrocities and genocide committed, that's continuing to be committed, by the way, by Israel. It's that simple. And if you don't like it and you're gonna do your little TikTok videos about it, go ahead. But that has no bearing on my opinions on foreign policy. Most entitled people on the planet. Anyway, let's hear more from our exchange.
The people of Iran deserve the type of leadership and government they want. And I hate the fact that an organic demonstration has effectively been co-opted by Israeli interests who brag almost on a daily basis at this point about how they have Mossad on the ground. Mossad bragged about it. Amichai Eliyahu, who is the cultural minister in Israel, bragged about it. Israeli papers are bragging about it. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, is bragging about it. Okay, having those types of insidious actors co-opting that demonstration is going to be to the detriment of Iran. And if Iranians want freedom, installing a Shah, installing a monarch who hasn't lived in the country for 47 years makes absolutely no sense.
It's that simple. It's not up to Iranian Americans who live in America to decide on behalf of the Iranian people who their leader should be, especially when we're talking about a guy who hasn't been in Iran for 47 years and wants to literally be a monarch. I don't know about you guys, but I'm personally against dictatorships and I'm personally against monarchy. Okay? Bunch of Iranian Americans trying to pressure me to change my mind about that isn't gonna work. Because it kind of touches on your core values. Anyway, it turns out I was onto something, by the way, because according to a protester who spoke to the Financial Times, the opposition abroad hijacked our protests, said one woman who joined in the rallies and opposes Pahlavi. Otherwise, things were moving forward and we might have gained concessions from the regime. Instead, the violence and crackdown pushed people back with nothing to show but deaths and destruction. Interesting, yeah. Well, the agitators also had access to certain weaponry. I wonder where they got that from, that ordinary Iranians don't have access to. So one demonstrator in Tehran told the Financial Times that there were groups of men in black clothes, agile and quick. They would set one dustbin on fire and then quickly move to the next target. Okay, well, I mean, that's just a few witnesses. Can't really mean much, right? Let's go to another one. Another witness in Western Tehran told the Financial Times he saw about a dozen fit men looking like commandos, dressed in similar black clothing, running through the area and calling on people to leave their homes and join the protests. Quote, "They were definitely organized, but I don't know who was behind them," he said. I mean, you have Israeli papers, you have Israeli media, you have the former US Secretary of State and former CIA, head of CIA, Mike Pompeo, bragging about how it's Mossad. So let me understand something. When they tell us, are we just supposed to ignore that and not believe them? Because they tell us. So when they tell us, I choose to believe them. So you have organic protests, which by the way, were spurred through economic frustrations, which are largely a problem in Iran because of the sanctions that the US has implemented against Iran on behalf of Israel. Of course, we take our marching orders from a foreign country, you see, that we haven't elected. And then those organic protests get co-opted by an insidious force in the region, and that's of course Israel and Mossad. And how does that benefit the Iranian people? How does it benefit the Iranian people to have, foreign interference with their demonstrations and protests? All right, so hundreds of Iranian security forces were also killed in ways that are similar to Israel's barbarism, which really stood out to me. So some were burned to death, others were beheaded. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, sorry, I'm mispronouncing the name, I apologize. Well, they described the unrest as day 13 of Israel's 12-day war against Iran in June. Now, another thing that happened that's worth mentioning, and this is according to the Jerusalem Post on January 8th, Iranian protesters attack Palestinian ambassador's residence, injure ambassador. Around 200 protesters stormed the residence of the Palestinian Authority's ambassador in Tehran, injuring Salam al-Zawawi, an embassy staff, and causing extensive damage, Iranian media reported. The ambassador was sent to the hospital because of the attack. So I'm just curious, does anyone who's watching this right now believe that Iranian citizens are real fired up about the Palestinian ambassador, so much so that 200 of them are gonna storm her office and her residence and try to physically harm her? What group of people on the international stage would have an interest in that? Okay. But I want to be clear, the Iranian regime engaged in violence against their own people. I don't deny that. Now, fog of war, I don't know the full details of what happened on the ground. But here's what I know for sure. I'm not going to sit on a Piers Morgan panel and be talked down to by a moron who thinks that I'm stupid and I don't see what's happening clearly. I see what's happening clearly. It's obvious. Regardless, Tim Dillon doesn't think any of this is America's problem. Here's what he had to say about it.
If they want to throw the bums who run Iran out, throw them the out. But the idea that the United States of America, when people can't afford houses and they can't afford health care, spends all its time talking about the Middle East and Arabs and Jews and religion and the temple and slaughtering the heifer and Iran and Sunnis and Shiites. Get what the is going on? Truly, what the is going on? That we're told, well, is Iran Sunni or Shia? What is happening? Okay? Our own country is being destroyed and it's going down the toilet.
True. Now, Tim Dillon, of course, is an American. And one thing that's clear is the American government doesn't seem to care much about what the American people have to say. But the White House, regardless of who's running it, could be Democrat, could be Republican, doesn't matter, is governed by the Knesset and the Israeli prime minister. So eventually, I have no doubt that they're gonna get their way and the US will probably be dragged into an ongoing, disastrous regime change war in Iran. But I just want to remember, I want all of us to remember that as we sink deeper and deeper into debt, we're at 40 trillion at this point. We already spent over $1 trillion just last year servicing our debt, just paying the interest on that debt. When our country collapses, I want you all to give yourself a pat on the back for helping to build Israel's empire while destroying and destabilizing multiple countries in the Middle East.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.